Hello and welcome to Inclusion Dialogue, a podcast where we discuss everything related to inclusive education and diversity in the classroom. My name is Joanne Banks and I'm a lecturer in Trinity College Dublin in the School of Education. This podcast consists of interviews between me and leading academics from all over the world where we discuss how we define inclusive and special education. We look at the difference between theory and practice and what inclusion looks like on the ground in our schools. I began this project for my students, and it was to allow them to hear the views of researchers that I was getting them to read in the form of journal articles and research reports. I've been pretty overwhelmed by the response though, and I think as the podcast has grown, it will be of a much broader appeal to other academics, to policymakers, to educators and practitioners, to parents, but also to students themselves. My guest this week is Professor Jayanti Narayan, who is visiting professor in the School of Education in the University of Northampton. In this podcast, we talk about inclusive education in the Indian context and how this has changed over time. In particular, Jayanti speaks of the inclusive nature of Indian society throughout history, and she describes her extensive research which looks at the barriers to inclusion from multiple perspectives, such as the teacher, parent and child. Okay, Jayanti, thank you so much for meeting with me today. I really appreciate you giving up the time and I'm really glad to meet you this morning and hear about your experiences working in the area of inclusive education. So thank you for being a part of this podcast. So I was just wondering if maybe we could start off by asking you how you ended up working in the area of inclusive education and maybe describing a little bit about your career in that kind of sector, if you like.
When I completed my graduation, I did my graduation in what we call as home science, as a bachelor's in home science. And in that, there is a subject called child development. And within that one, there is one called deviations in development. So that subsection fascinated me. Then I decided to do specialize in that. But unfortunately, we didn't have many courses in India at that time. And so there was this one diploma after graduation I did that was from within India. I was fascinated by it, like children can be different and how fortunate we are to be the way we are. Then I further went to the US to do my master's. At that point of time, we didn't have masters. So then came back and started to work in the field of special education. And Government of India started this institute called National Institute for the Mentally Handicapped, now renamed to go with the right terminology to use and all that. So National Institute for the Empowerment of Persons with Intellectual Disabilities. So I had been there with that institute for about 23 years, 19 years of which was as a head of special education and the rest as a deputy director of the institute. And this is a research institute, research and training institute. So we train students a diploma, degree, and postgraduate and doctoral level students. And also we have the research projects that each one of us held in the respective area. We had departments of medical sciences and therapeutics and psychology and special education and vocational training. So it continues. I'm still in the same city. I continue to be visiting my institute even now, though I'm retired.
Okay.
And the research happens and then documentation and dissemination. And it's under the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment at the central government.
At the central
So this was the major, central government. So this was the major chunk of my professionally effective years that I had spent. Wonderful work. You know, the institute also gave us opportunities to really grow, to take up projects and do well, supported. We didn't have to look around for funding because government funded many of the projects also. So I would say, sorry, you wanted to say something?
No, I was just going to ask you, just given that you were there as director for 20 years, is that correct?
Deputy director. Deputy director for 4 years. And the rest of the years, I was heading the Department of Special Education.
Can I ask you, given that you spent such a long time there, it was a period of great change in India, how did the kind of understanding of inclusive education change, do you think, over that time?
It's really a good question. In fact, when the institute started, India did not have, it's 1985 the institute started, and we did not have acts and policies in place for education of children with disabilities or rights of persons with disabilities for that matter. So our institute, similarly, Government of India, the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment started in national institutes for hearing impaired, for vision impairment, for locomotor disabilities in different parts of the country. And ours was in Hyderabad, where I live now, south central part of India. So at that time, when our institutes were established, we did not have acts for persons with disabilities at that point of time. And in 1995, the first Persons with Disabilities, Equal Opportunities, Protection of Rights and Full Participation Act came into place in 1995. In 1992, there was this Rehabilitation Council of India Act that regulated human resource development in the field of disability. That was a major milestone, I would say, in developing quality professionals. Till then, as I told you, we didn't have many. So many parents started little training programs here and there, because at that point of time, children who were little different, who were not falling into the so-called norms. They were rejected from the schools, children with disabilities, if you would like to use the terminology there. So parents, out of frustration, not having a place for their children to go, many initial organizations in India were in the early years of even 50s and 60s, I would say, were initiated by parents predominantly.
Interesting. Yeah.
So the RCI, that is Rehabilitation Council of India Act 1992, came up with Human Resource Development Regulation. So all of us, for instance, have a license number for us, like a medical doctor.
Yeah.
Because we have to go through that courses only that are approved by Rehabilitation Council of India. Okay. And after we complete the course, we have to register ourselves. So suppose someone is looking for a job today in the area of rehabilitation. So in the application form, it will ask the third question after your name and details, RCI, CRR number, central register number. That number is not there, we won't get a job. So that has been a very big moment in the country in bringing out quality rehabilitation professionals, including special educators, therapists, psychologists, social workers, orthotic, prosthetic engineers, you name it. So many courses are under that. So that was in 1992. Then 1999, there was a Guardianship Act for the 4 disabilities who cannot independently live, how much ever we work with them, namely the ones with autism spectrum disorders, cerebral palsy, intellectual disability, and multiple disabilities. So the Guardianship Act 1999 also has a major role to play in terms of when there is no one for this child, there should be some way of taking care of them. And one thing about India, Joanne, I would like to highlight here with pride, is that India has never been a country which excluded, or not exclude, that's a wrong word, I would say, separated children from their families and put them in institutions or special places. Whatever is the little resources available, the persons with the disability always stayed with the family. So it is an inclusive society, basically. And if the father and mother in villages go for work, and there is this young man with the intellectual disability who doesn't go to school also, the neighbors naturally take care of him. They feed him on time. They make sure he doesn't get lost and he's around. And, we have had a lot of experiences how the neighborhood takes care when we go to villages for our visits. So
interesting.
Yeah, resources may be minimum, and they may not have a high quality life, but then the person stays with them. This is from time immemorial that's the way it goes. And if the parents are no more, naturally the siblings take care. If he doesn't have a sibling, a family member takes care, but he lives with them. So the 1999 Guardianship Act took some effort towards giving them some financial assistance, so that whoever is taking care of them, every month there is a small amount in the name of this person coming in, so that he could be taken care of. So
how much emphasis in the act is on? You've mentioned the kind of care, and I noticed you used the term rehabilitation. How much emphasis is on the education of the young person?
So these 3 acts had their role to play, and then comes education, predominantly, I told you parents started special schools and that was a movement. And later, this Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, which was called as Welfare Ministry at that point of time, they started to fund special schools for the deaf, or special schools for the intellectually persons with intellectual disability or with cerebral palsy. So the special schools grew, especially the 1980s, when our institutes were all developed by the Government of India, and a lot of RCI qualified professionals, the Rehabilitation Council of India. They all also started to initiate schools because government was funding. Parallelly, to answer your question, the Ministry of Human Resource Development, which also has the Department of Education, they came up with the scheme 1986 National Education Policy. For the first time, included a subsection on education of children with disabilities in the education department.
Okay.
Which said that children with mild disabilities will go to regular schools and provisions will be made for them. And those with moderate severe disabilities will have provisions made at district level in each of the states. Occasionalization of education will be encouraged, and then the teacher education program will be reformed to equip the teachers to work with these children. This was in 1986, and then the plan of action got implemented in 1992. So parallelly, the education departments, and they started to work on this, and they called this program as IED, Integrated Education of Disabled Persons. So this was done in a project mode in different parts of the country, because it was again central government, so they just spread out into different parts of the country. Then the integration and inclusion, when we differentiate this, the integrated education demanded that a child with a certain disability will study with other children in the general classrooms after he is prepared to be part of the general classroom by the special education counterparts of the teachers, which means a child will have to learn his braille, the child will have to learn to understand lip reading or sign language, whatever. And so the regular teacher, in essence, the regular teacher did not have the onus on to her about this child's education. So this child will be prepared from the regular special education counterparts of the regular teacher, and then send them to the classroom, and then the education went on. That was a phase, evolution. Then with the Salamanca Declaration and all that happening, inclusive education everywhere, and India was one of the early countries to be also signing the, not just signing, ratifying UNCRPD. So the inclusive education really caught on. Alongside another thing that happened, see, with my gray hair, I'm telling stories now with years and events. So 2009, we had this Right to Education Act implemented, which meant that the education is a fundamental right. Till then, education was not a fundamental right in children, but it was what they called, the Constitution called this as a directive principle, which means it's done with goodwill, it is in the Constitution.
Yes.
The moment you say fundamental right, deprivation, the person can go to court. That is the idea.
Yeah.
So 2009, this RTE, or Right to Education Act, came into effect, and all the governments started to work towards it. The regular classes have to include children with disabilities, so education for all. So this included children not only with disabilities, but children who belong, India has caste system, SC, ST, who were the deprived social groups in India since historic it is, early years. And so they are being encouraged to get educated and have equal opportunities like anybody else in the country. And government is doing a lot of work to support them in terms of education, in terms of job opportunities, and number of things.
Yes.
So the CWSN, as the Education Ministry lingo calls it, children with special needs. So CWSN includes children who belong to Scheduled Caste and Scheduled Tribe, children with disabilities, children with who are socio-economically
disadvantage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So all of these children have to study and they have a right to education like anyone else in the regular schools, failing which they can go to court. So the moment it became an act, all the systems got revamped now. And currently, every school is expected to have children with disabilities and not to reject. Earlier, as I told you, parents found their children getting rejected.
Yes.
So they started to. So now, the parent can go to court today. So every school is expected to have children with the disability.
And
to ask something?
Yeah, does it have resource implications? Because if you include the children who are socioeconomic disadvantaged, or you mentioned the caste system, that's quite a large and children with disabilities, although I know they must overlap. That's quite a significant number of children. And does it have budgetary implications then?
Yes. These are all good you asked that question, otherwise I might not have thought about it. This is a centrally sponsored scheme. They started it as a centrally sponsored scheme. They called it Education for All. In Sanskrit or Hindi, it goes Sarva Siksha Abhiyan. Every child gets educated. Okay. So that is a centrally sponsored scheme implemented by state government. So every state government is given money for the state to implement the scheme. As you know, we have 29 states and 7 union territories in the country. So all of these places, this money, a good amount of money is given to each of the states, and then they are implemented. And today, this is called SSA. If anybody wants to Google SSA, you will get a whole lot of information.
Okay.
That Sarva Siksha Abhiyan, as I told you, education for all. Now it was covering 6 to 14 years of age of children. Now we have the scheme again revamped to call it a Samagra Siksha Abhiyan that covers kindergarten to class 12.
Which would be class 12 being what age? Up to the age of 18 or something?
18, up to 18 years.
18, okay, very good.
Yeah. So Samagra Siksha is equal opportunities for all children. So now the government is really taking this seriously, and not only that, the regular education was having its own teacher preparation to include children with disabilities. Now, through these schemes, those teachers who are certified by Rehabilitation Council of India as special educators are employed by the Ministry of Education to help the regular teacher in their classroom. And the onus of this child is on to the regular teacher. This is what is differentiating integrated education from inclusive education. So integrated education, the onus was not on to the regular teacher. The child gets prepared and comes into the class. If you can, you come and join. If you cannot, find an alternative. Now, the inclusive education demands that the onus is on to the regular teacher, and she is supported by special educators who are certified by Rehabilitation Council of India. That comes under the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment.
Can I ask you a little bit about the research that you've carried out over the last number of years, on what it has found, and where would you like to see further policy change based on your findings?
Research towards education, particularly inclusive education.
Yes.
Inclusive education, predominantly the research programs have been where I have been involved and my colleagues have been involved, and the MPhil PhD students have been involved, is on teacher resistance. Why teachers resist inclusion? A major chunk of the study is done on teacher resistance.
So this is the mainstream teacher resisting that movement that you're talking about, from integration to inclusion. And what has that shown for you?
So the regular educators as a philosophy do not have any objections to inclusive education. They are happy to have children with disabilities in their classroom, but they say that we don't have the know-how with us and we don't have the time to prepare for these children. And so we should be best is take away these children and let the special educators teach them. If that is not possible, inclusion has to be there. We need the support of special education teachers in our classrooms as a team teaching support or in whatever way possible. This is one. And another interesting thing, when we look at the parental attitude towards inclusion, many parents whose children are having severe disability, moderate severe disabilities, prefer that their children go to a special school. They say that the attention given to children, the teacher-student ratio, when you look at, there may not be more than 6 to 8 children under one teacher. And the attention given is better, child is better protected, particularly female children as they grow up. The parents more and more prefer that the children go to a protected environment of a special school. Our public schools, I don't know if you have any idea, will have a class, kindergarten to 12th class, if I say, easily 1,500 to 2,500 children, depending upon the size of the school, whether it is a private or
government
public school. Yeah, so the number will be too much. These children can get lost or get bullied. The parental fear is always there that they prefer special schools. And our ministry, the Social Justice and Empowerment, continues to fund special schools. There are some special schools that continue to increase every year in different disability areas. And the inclusive education also is happening, which includes also curricular adaptations, teaching methodology adaptation, evaluation changes, the accommodation and modifications. All that is seriously being done to accommodate these children, that we have children with intellectual disability who, as a student, I studied, even the mild intellectual disability cannot go beyond class 6 level. Today, we find them completing class 10 with all the adaptations made. Yeah. So, I will call this a big progress that has happened in the country towards inclusion. And another interesting study, it is not published, but it is in the pipeline to be published, is the peer group, how they felt about having children with disabilities in their classrooms. And very nice to see that they are always eager and open to have them. And even if the child says, I don't need a help, they are eager to help him because he has. Yeah. And I also find children with the qualitative studies, these are. So even children with disabilities are eager to help those without disabilities in some manner or other. They are always wanting to help. I realized one of these, during the break time, the children were talking to a child who cannot see. Your eyes are always closed. Do you sleep at all? Do you get dream at all? You don't see anything. What do you see in your dreams? And he was eagerly answering all those.
Yeah.
Whatever you are able to see, you see in your dreams. What I am able to see, I see in my dreams. I see many, many things. And nonchalant that kid is, happily he was answering.
Yes.
It's beautiful to see at the child level a spontaneous acceptance and inclusion.
And normalizing it, yes. So what would you like to see? What would you like to see happen next? So you mentioned the kind of resistance amongst the teaching staff towards maybe moving to inclusive education, but it sounds like that's out of a lack of the training capacity issue. So what else is required to kind of move the inclusive agenda on, or would you consider the dual special school and mainstream school, would you consider that model to be effective, and should that continue?
See, ultimately, we need to go by the parental preferences. Even now, our National Education Policy 2020 has come out, revised this year, our National Education Policy, that says the choice of school will be that of the person with the disability, or if he cannot decide, will be that of the parent. So special schools will remain. And we also have one more category of, avenue of education called home-based instructions. So children who are profoundly disabled, non-ambulatory, who cannot reach a school, and they are in the remote, tucked away areas where there is a big distance between the school and home. And also his level of functioning is such with the self-help skills learning and all that he's not going to benefit from a regular school, let us say. So this home-based instruction is very much in the third avenue that we are offering in India. One is the regular schools, and the two is the special school, and third is the home-based instruction. All these three roads are there for a child to take the education. So here, for the home-based instruction, the special educator goes to the homes. And then she uses not only the parents, but also the other resources at home, like a grandparent who's at home and who thinks I'm not much of a help to my family, suddenly starts to feel very purposeful in his life when he is tagged on to this child, or she is tagged on to the grandmother is tagged on to the child. The whole family, there is a transformation. And the resources available within the house is only used for training the child also, for feeding, brushing, bathing, toileting, dressing, any of those needs that are still there.
You mentioned the kind of three forms of provision.
Avenues, yeah.
So how do you how does that compatible with the kind of direct nature of the UNCRPD document and the general comment document about it specifies that anything outside full inclusion is essentially you're not meeting your obligations as a country? Where do you put that? Yeah.
Okay. Let us understand inclusion and inclusive education as two concepts. So inclusive education is where the child goes and sits in the classroom with all other children in a regular school and studies. And inclusion is preparing him to be part of the society. So whichever avenue you take. So even in a special school, you can prepare the child eventually to be part of the society. The special school takes him to places in the community. Special school makes sure that he's a contributing member in his community. He learns the basic skills to be living in the community, the vocational training and job placement. It leads him through. Ultimately, he's included. But he's prepared in a specialized environment where the teaching learning experience is meaningful to the child and also to the teacher, because she knows what I'm trying to do with him, knowing his capacity. And attention to him is much more than when he will be in a classroom with all other children. So inclusion, yes, all the children have to be included. Inclusive education can be very child specific, convenience of the parents, convenience of the person himself or herself, how he feels about where he is more comfortable. And both are open in the country. And therefore, the inclusive education is with the Ministry of Education. And the other two, special schools and home-based instruction, we tend to give through the Social Justice and Empowerment Ministry. The funding, when you look at it,
is separate.
Yeah, and inclusive education also funds home-based instruction for those children who are enrolled in the school, but the instruction reaches his house.
Right.
So the education department also is giving it importance there.
I'm finished my kind of questions for you, Jayanti, but do you have anything that you'd like to say before I let you go back to your day? But is there anything else you would like to raise while we're talking?
One, the education system itself in the country, unlike what I have seen in the West, is that we have these public schools, that is the government schools, private schools and private aided schools. Government aided schools. The government schools, the private schools and the government aided schools. And it is the choice of the parent to send the child to whichever he chooses the school. To that school he can send. It depends upon his affordability if he wants a private school. Government schools are everywhere, but not all parents choose to send the children to the government schools. And the syllabus also, again, we have the syllabus as central government syllabus. So all the central government syllabus following schools tend to have the CBSE, we call it. When they get transferred from state to state, they don't have an issue. You see, India has many languages, at least 22 officially recognized languages. So if you learn the state language, state syllabus school, you learn the state language. And if the father get transferred to another city, decide to move to another place, they have language difficulty. So many who are transferable tend to choose the central government syllabus, Central Government Examination Board, CBSE as they call it. So we have a CBSE board, we have a state board, we have an IB board, international schools have an IB board. So the general education itself, we have all of these. And then into that comes our inclusion, and all the three streams are trying to implement inclusive education to the extent possible. And I would not say everything is very nicely happening. There are schools which resist, and there are schools which are open, but then not really attending to the child as much as you would like him to be attended to. And then the central government's special educators, they are not in every single school because of the paucity of teachers. So one teacher might have 3 to 4 schools to cover. So she's itinerant. So she's not in one school all the time. So we need more of these special educators' support to the regular educator. And the NEP 2020 that I spoke to you just now talks about revamping the regular teacher education to include teaching all children in the classroom, UDL, using the UDL principles. Yeah. So when that comes, I think I'll be happier than how I am today.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a nice note to finish on, universal design for learning. I think it's probably quite a good idea to finish on that. Jayanti, thank you so much for your time today. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I appreciate you giving us an insight into the Indian perspective on inclusive education. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I cherish. Thank you so much, Joanne. Have a good day.
I hope you took something from that interview, so thank you for listening. Feel free to spread the word and share the episode. You can find out more from my academic website, bankoninclusion.com, and I will catch you next time.